Welcome everybody to this webinar, Why Certified Actuarial Analysts Add Value to Employers, and it's brought to you by CAA Global and EPR Actuarial Solutions. I hope you enjoy this second webinar around this subject of the day. And welcome wherever you are in the globe to this session. It's a great pleasure to welcome some co-speakers with me. My name is Clifford Friend, and I'm one of the directors of CAA Global Limited. And I have the pleasure of being on this webinar with two of my director colleagues from CAA Global, Stacey Lynn and Richard Vase, and they will be speaking a little bit in a moment about the broader aspects of CAA Global. We're also very, very pleased to be co-presenting this webinar with APR Actuarial Solutions, and we have James Nichol from APR with us. He's an associate partner at APR, and these are a specialist interim resourcing bespoke consulting company in both life insurance and general insurance. And interestingly, since, as James will tell you, since about 2017, have been recruiting and using CAAs in their business. So today is a blend. It's a game of two halves. A little bit about the credential for those that are maybe less familiar with CAA, and then more from James about how CAAs can be integrated into an actuarial business. And I hope you find that interesting. Now, the plan is to be with one another for an hour, with about 30 minutes of presentational material, which gives us plenty of time for some questions and answers. And hopefully you see on your Blue Jeans webinar interface a Q&A function. So we will be collecting those questions. Please post your questions, any questions you have, as we go through the presentation, and we will be consolidating those together, and hopefully we'll have a good collection of questions for the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, if I may have the next slide, please. This one I just want to say something about what we intend to cover today. So we're going to look at the CAA qualification. We're going to look at its target audience. Interestingly, many people like to know how this fits within the spectrum of other actuarial qualifications. And then on moving towards James's contribution, looking at the benefits to learners, but also to employers. So we're very interested in speaking with employers about how CAAs might fit within their business. And James is going to share with you, so this doesn't turn into just a pure marketing, apparently a marketing pitch, you know, both the pros and cons and some of the challenges, and as we say here, some pitfalls maybe to watch out. I think you'll find from James's comments many myths, and so there's a bit of myth busting here. And then you don't have to believe me, you don't have to believe James, you don't have to believe Stacey or Richard. There's some case studies that you'll see from CAAs, those that employ CAAs, hopefully to proof point much of what we're saying. So many people don't know very much about CAA Global, so it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Vase, one of our co-directors of CAA Global, who's just going to say very quickly a little bit about the back history of CAA Global before we move on to look at the qualification. Over to you, Richard.
Great. Thank you, Clifford. Yes, as where did the CAA qualification and the entity come from? The CAA Global Limited was established as an entity, as a joint venture between the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries and the Society of Actuaries. This was established in the fall of 2016, and its origins as a joint venture of these two organizations is very important, we feel, to the growth and the opportunity here, because these are the two largest actuarial credentialing organizations in the world. And between them, their presence and their reputation for actuarial credentialing is truly global, recognized on every continent. So by combining the resources and the influence of these two organizations, we've established here a credential that has already achieved and is certainly got the potential to achieve complete global recognition and value to the actuarial profession. And that's going to be very important so that as employers in particular will recognize that whether it is staffing a home office location in London or Shanghai or Chicago, or whether it is looking to staff an actuarial support center that might be offshored in India or the Philippines or Lisbon or something of that nature, the recognition of what the skills and qualifications of this qualification, this credential are, will be consistent and recognized anywhere in the world. So I think, again, the formation of this entity as a joint venture between IFOA and SOA is an important aspect, I think, that supports the recognition of the credential.
Thank you very much, Richard. And if I might have the next slide, I'm just going to say a few words as background for those that might be less familiar with the CEA itself. And of course, if you've got questions, please post them and we will deal with them during the Q&A session. So let's just focus on the qualification for just a moment and the context of it. There's a very widespread recognition that there was a need for a global credential for professionals operating in the wider financial services sector. And by wider, we mean wider in terms of competencies maybe and role, and we also mean wider in terms of the domains of the financial services sector. So this qualification is focused towards what is sometimes called para actuarial roles, support the work of actuaries. But we recognise, and many employers recognise and learn that the skills from the CIA are also applicable to those in the wider financial services sector that interact with actuaries, or where just the skill set that people acquire during qualifying as a CIA are applicable in other areas which are non-actuarial in nature within financial services. So that's something around, and we come to a little bit of the detail about what the content of the CEA is in just a moment. But it's essentially a professional credential for individuals excelling in technical and analytical skills. So you can see how that will have a wider context than just actuarial. And the interesting dimension here is that these individuals in people's businesses are often uncredentialed. And this, the CA offers a credentializing of those professionals of value to the individual themselves, as well as providing the employers with clearly credentialed professionals. And I know that James will touch a little bit about the value that this can produce when he talks a little bit more from the employer perspectives later in this webinar. So if I can have the next slide, please. Something just in very broad sweep over what the nature of the program is. It's a 2 to 3 year program, so you'll see that the joint venture created in late fall or autumn 2016 means that we're just at the stage where we're beginning to see the individuals that started to study then coming out of the pipeline and actually qualifying, and Stacey will just touch on that in just a moment. 2 to 3 years to complete the program is a typical time. These people are often working within business while they're taking the credential. It involves passing exam modules, more on that in just a moment. Providing evidence of 1 year's relevant work experience, because this is a professional credential, so we're interested in this being more than just an academic qualification. It's a professional qualification, so we do require at least 1 year's relevant work experience to be demonstrated. And then because, again, it's a professional credential, demonstrating engagement with the professional conduct environment, so need to pass an online professional awareness test. It sounds much more serious than it actually is, and I think many candidates actually enjoy the professional awareness test quite a lot. And at that point in time, the academic program is complete for the credential. And then the model of operation is CAA Global then say goodbye to those candidates, in a sense, as they go to join as professional analysts the Global Actuarial Association's accredited body. And you've heard from Richard that the IFOA and the SOA, as both founders and shareholders of this, are two of the associations currently accredited by the company. And there is a third. It's no surprise that the program was launched at the International Actuarial Association in South Africa a few years ago. And the South African Actuarial Association has relatively recently joined as another accredited global association. And the model is that we will grow as you see CAAs grow around the globe in number. More associations join this family. So there was a local home for all the members, all the qualifiers from this program in an association which can look after their long-term lifelong learning, as well as the regulatory aspects. And we may have some questions about that later, and we may touch on that in some later slides. And then once qualified, of course, that then enables the individual to carry the designation wherever they want to practice around the globe as a certified actuarial analyst. So if I may have the next slide, please. The next slide just shows a brief overview of the nature of the program. What we're proud about the program is, if you look at the top of this slide, Module 0, this is in essence an entry test. So we're very, very proud that this is an open access program. If you can make the study required to pass Module 0, you're on the program with no further consideration of any pre-qualifications. So it's open access, which speaks to our commitment to a diversity agenda, to say you can join as a graduate, you could join way beyond a graduate if you wished, or you can join maybe straight out of school. And you'll hear a little from James about some of the challenges around that, but some of the benefits about that spread of diverse skills and experience, and how that can enhance a business that is recruiting CAAs. So having passed this open access entry test Module 0, we have a 4-module structure: finance and financial mathematics, as you can see, stats and models, long-term actuarial mathematics, and short-term actuarial mathematics, delivered in around 1,500 examination centres around the globe, and delivered through a computer-moderated interface using modern multiple choice questioning techniques. So that forms the core of the qualification. And when individuals have passed the entry test and those 4 modules, there is then a completion of a more conventional type of examination related to models and audit trails. And then that is the qualification process subject to the professionalism test, meeting the experiential requirements and entering into membership with one of the accredited actuarial associations. So that's the nature of the program, and I'm going to turn and ask my colleague Stacey Lynn to just say a little bit about where candidates currently sit around the world, and also how they kind of fit in the business, before we then move on to look at James's experience of CAAs and the case studies. Over to you, Stacey.
Thank you, Clifford. So basically a little bit about the candidate pool, and you'll see the slide here with the graph. It's a very geographically diverse group of people. It's across most continents. You'll see, we have a very strong traction in Europe and Africa, and it's growing in Asia and North America. So you see a very strong foothold in Europe and Africa. We are seeing recognition by the regulators, which is great. Particularly Nigeria and Georgia regulators are attracted in building, recognizing the credential and supporting programs that lead to becoming credentialed. We also see cooperation with ASSA, the South African Actuarial Association, and also the World Bank. So it's an interesting mix. The regulators are appreciating it, World Bank's appreciating it, and other associations. So it's an interesting group that has come together around the CAA credential. You'll see that it's fitting both mature markets in UK and South Africa, and it's also building out in developing markets like Nigeria. So I think that tells us that it's a good credential. It's a strong mix of skills that are applicable in many markets, both mature and less mature. So we think it's a sweet spot for the credential. The average age of credential candidates is 26 to 30, but we do see a sizable number in the younger group, 18 to 25, and also older groups. It's an interesting swath of people across many age groups, including people in their 40s and 50s. So it's interesting that it's a way people are choosing to obtain a credential at any point in their career. So with that, next slide, please. Okay, so where does the CAA fit? And that's a challenging question. If there is no single answer to this, we're seeing that it fits within actuarial departments, certainly. We're also seeing it in teams that are alongside an actuarial department. We've also seen it completely separate. So I think it's, each employer has a different structure for how they're working, how they're blending their actuarial teams, how they're blending them in with the other departments in companies. So we also see the CAAs working alongside the data science teams, within the data science teams, and between the actuarial team and the data science team. So again, it's an interesting choice of opportunities for candidates. So when we look at what the employers are really looking for, we see that where the actual resource is scarce and they need to supplement with another skill set to build out a team and build out more capacity, we see that's where they're drawn to the CAA credential. Some examples of roles and titles that we've heard for CAAs that we know about are an actuarial analyst, a predictive analyst. We hear data science. We've seen climate analyst, data modeler, policy analyst, customer analyst modeler, and unstructured data analyst. So again, you'll see that each company is mixing it in with their current structure and certainly their current, how they title people and how they compensate people. So you'll see that the variety of titles there, again, giving CAAs lots of opportunities to work, with data science, with actuarial science, and among the two groups and between the two groups. Thank you. I think we can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Stacy. I'm going to jump in here, and in just a minute or two, we'll have an opportunity to hear from James in terms of his company's actual experience in incorporating and utilizing the qualification for its staff and its purposes. But wanted to begin by just talking a bit here about the intention. As CAA Global Limited was formed and introduced this qualification, it was intended to serve the interest of both the qualification holder and the actuarial or other employer who could utilize the skills of those who hold the qualification. I wanted to touch again just for a minute on the intention to provide benefits that serve sort of both sides of that equation. With respect to the learners, first and foremost was to provide a content, a skills and qualifications that would be highly recognized in terms of the value add capabilities of the individual who holds the qualification. But more than that, it's the concept Clifford referred to a little bit ago about professionalizing. It's taking a segment of individuals who before had really no opportunity to establish that the role that they are performing is a professional support role and has the attributes of the professionalism. That is a set of conduct expectations and professionalism, lifelong learning, which is an important element of any profession, and sort of the opportunity to be part of a global community much the way that those who have obtained actuarial credentials have that opportunity to have a broad network of peers who have similar qualifications, similar like interests and experiences. It does the same for the individuals at this level of an operation to have that global community and network of fellow professionals. And again, for the learners, those who seek to obtain the qualification, it's important to recognize that there are no prerequisites, there are no barriers to entry. If someone has been in one of those types of roles that Stacy just mentioned, related to data analytics, whether it's in the actuarial field or not, this is an opportunity for those learners to gain a set of skills and qualifications that are relevant, relevant to their work and their future development, and as an entryway to any number of different sort of employment applications in the actuarial industry or otherwise. Next slide, please. And flipping for just a minute and looking at it from the perspective of the employer, we've all heard, I think, the reference very often given that a company's greatest assets are its people. This is the opportunity for an employer to take a set of individuals who perform a critical and important role in their organization and to upgrade the careers and the recognition of that group of individuals. It professionalizes the role that they perform in technical and analytical work. It provides, I think it's a selling point for the clients of those organizations to be able to point to, the fact that they have got this level of skill that has been developed and the investment that they have made in their actuarial support employees. It will serve both to attract the highly qualified individuals to that employer, and by giving them the opportunity to develop and enhance their careers with the organization through this credential, it aids in the staff retention for those individuals as well. So it's our conception here that this offering this credential serves both the benefits of the employee and the individual learner, as well as the employer who can put that qualification and that career to use. And at this point, we'll turn it over to James and let him speak more specifically about his firm's experience in doing that.
Thank you very much, Rich. Yeah, so as mentioned, I'm going to tilt the lens ever so slightly now and consider it from the point of view of us here at APR as a company that have been employing CAA analysts since 2017. We're basically going to share some of our experiences of sort of, the pros and cons that we've seen of hiring people for the CAA qualification. So obviously, I'll start with the advantages. And I think for us, the biggest advantage we've seen is that our traditional hiring pool for graduate actuaries is very narrow. But the CAA qualification and hiring people towards that qualification allows us to hire from a much wider area. We can hire from school leavers, we can look at career changers, and it just gives us, a much greater level of diversity within our company, both, along gender and ethnicity, and also just diversity of experiences. And with that, it just brings so many different ways of looking at problems, so many different initiatives that people want to push on. And we've really benefited, and it's really helped us to grow over the last few years with all those new ideas coming in as part of that. And another one of the really big advantages of the CAA qualification is that it does give those CAAs a really excellent technical grounding in the core skills that you need within an actuarial office. And then that leads on and breeds confidence, one, within the holder of that qualification, that they have this qualification, this technical backing behind them, to go ahead and do this work and produce this value for us. And then for ourselves and for our clients, the confidence that, we are getting a high level of work because they have that qualification and backing of the professional body behind them. And that, is a real asset for, all of these para-actuarial sort of disciplines we've been discussing. And then really the last big advantage, which to be honest, whenever we started looking at CAA Global, was one that we thought would come right at the top of the list. But as we've gone on, we've realized that while it's an advantage, it's definitely not as high up there as the other ones we've discussed, is the cost. And the fact that it allows us to bring on people to study towards, a qualification within the actuarial domain, but the cost is not quite as high as it is of hiring actuarial graduates and putting them through the full fellowship exams here in the UK. And so that allows us to utilize them in other areas where previously for clients it would have been prohibitive to use actuarial resource. So those are the main advantages we've seen. And now I'll move on to the next slide. And so whenever we were first setting up this proposition, there are a couple of areas that we needed to watch out for. And so we'll just share those with you now. And the first couple are around your recruitment and training. Obviously, I've covered that with CAAs. It's a much wider pool of candidates that you might be drawing from. And we just had to take that into account whenever we were designing the recruitment process, because we couldn't just rely on our standard recruitment process, which assumes a given level of university maths. It probably makes some assumptions on the experience they've had on that. And we just had to make sure that, we were focusing on the target audience, just making sure that we weren't being unfair in either of these areas. Then the next thing we have to consider is considering your wage structure. So Stacey covered on the very broad range of areas that CAAs are working in at the moment. And certainly we see the CAA qualification as a stepping stone into many different areas, as part of the wider actuarial domain. And so with the wage structure, you just want to be careful that you're not setting it up with discontinuities that will close off your CAA stepping into becoming data scientists afterwards, or into, more modeling and predictive analysis or those sorts of things. The apprenticeship question is UK specific, as the UK government provides additional funding for apprentices, which the CAA fall under. And I definitely would encourage, if you're considering the CAA option, encourage to look into your own jurisdiction and are there incentives, for taking on people at the sort of apprentice level on that, as you may get some support for the training or the recruitment if you want to go down that route. And then the final area we just had to consider is, with people coming in from a much broader range, potentially some straight from school into their first career, making sure that sort of support network was there, that little bit of additional mentoring just to help them into that transition, potentially through their first set of exams where they're studying independently, and just to make sure again that, you provide the support there that they can springboard off into a successful career. And I'll now move on to the next slide. So Clifford mentioned I'm going to debunk some myths. So I know after doing a slide where we discuss potential pitfalls, that tends to send people's minds going, and you start thinking about, oh, there's a lot of risks involved in this. And so hopefully in this slide, I'm going to pull out some of those objections that might be bubbling away in the back of your mind and make you realize that either they aren't risks at all, or they are risks that you can easily mitigate, and that yes, you should still be going ahead on hiring CAAs. So the first batch are objections that kind of we've had from a few different quarters, that school leavers or career changers are higher risk hires. It's harder to hire because it's a wider pool you're pulling from. Because of that as well, you can't be sure of the skills they have, so you have to do a lot of hand holding at the start. And we find that's definitely not the case. And you should do as well, because it's all to do about your hiring process. Whenever you're going out to recruit for new staff, regardless of the position, you know the kind of skills you're looking for. You know the kind of people who are going to do a good job for your organization. And so as long as you just apply those same sort of criteria and rigor to your recruitment process, you will hire good people who'll do a good job for you, regardless of whether it's a CAA or, the graduate actuarial qualification or what have you. The next one is then a follow-on from that is what happens once they've qualified as a CAA, if they want to move on to do the fellowship exams in the UK, the Society of Actuary exams in the US, if they want to move on and do a data science qualification, because some people view that as you've then lost your CAA. But we wouldn't view that way. We view it as actually, this is a good thing. This is further development for your staff, building on a qualification they already have, adding more value to you as a company. So why would you want to stand in the way of that? So we actively encourage it here at APR. And then the final two objections are ones that we get quite a lot from our clients whenever we suggest using our CAAs to help them solve their problems. And the first one just seems to be a general prejudice against youth, because some of our CAAs were born in the noughties. So yes, they're young, but that's only a good thing. It brings youthful energy, it brings enthusiasm, it brings a want, to get in there, get under the hood, get things solved and do good things. And so we only see that as an advantage. And the last point that we get from clients is a lot of managers thinking, well, I don't have any more junior work in my team. And I think this is really just a slight misunderstanding of where the CAA qualification sits. It's not designed to do that work that's beneath the rest of your team. It's designed to help your team with a lot of the work that actually maybe they pick up, but someone with a different qualification, in this case the CAA qualification, is much better placed to pick up, bringing other members of your team to do work that sits more in their specialism. And that's certainly what we find a lot is CAAs a lot of the time do free up graduate students to then be working on different things, and it really helps to complement the already existing workforce. Clifford mentioned at the start that you wouldn't just be hearing from us. So that's all I have to say at this point. And now we have a quick video where we're going to hear from a couple of our CAAs and a couple of managers from other companies who've used CAAs and their experience of qualification so far.
Since joining as a CAA, I've been involved in lots of different types of work and roles. I started working at a pensions company, but I've since moved into general insurance, working in both pricing and capital modelling teams. All of my roles have required analysis of data, mainly working within Excel. However, I have also had experience in other coding languages like R and Python, as well as some specialist capital modelling and pension modelling software.
So I found in most of my clients that there isn't really a common distinction between CAA students and compared to FIA students. In the workplaces that I've been, I've only ever worked with CAAs that have come from APR, so I still feel like there's a lot of space in the market for CAAs to be employed by actuarial firms or insurance firms. I think the most common misunderstanding is that people don't actually know what the CAA qualification is, and they assume instantly that since you're an actuarial student that you're doing the graduate actuarial exams, FIA exams.
Everyone knows how very challenging, in proportion to how prestigious the fellowship path is, and there are many people, for whatever reason, who would be put off by that. And I think, as we've talked about before, people from underprivileged backgrounds, people who don't necessarily know they have the skills or the confidence to take on the fellowship path, but might be extremely well placed to be actuaries. The CAA gives them the opportunity to try it out. The short time horizon, as I've said before, before you've got something rubber stamped as a certified qualification. The focus on foundational skills rather than necessarily the breadth of skills that make up a fellow. Give them an opportunity to try something out, and that benefits the people who want to join the profession, but it also benefits managers and people who are hiring. in this day and age, I think people are looking for rounded, multi-skilled people more and more. And one of the things I'd say as a technology provider, the bulk of the hiring I do nowadays is engineering related, but it's extremely useful, and it has been extremely useful to have people with a domain-specific actuarial skills alongside any technical skills that they've accrued or are accruing as part of their job or their training. So providing a complementary subset of the actuarial skills for people who want to either commit to being an actuary later or want to do something actuarial but not fully actuarial, broadens the hiring pool, it broadens the talent pool, and it benefits everyone as far as I'm concerned.
So we've been working on a massive migration project, and that involves rebuilding a lot of things that we've had kicking around for years, and that requires a lot of development. That development requires testing, and that testing is massive across so many different areas of the business, so many different actuarial calculations, illustrations in particular, and it's something where we need people who are able to pick things up very quickly, and we need people who can work on lots of different things at the same time, deal with the pressure of a big program where there's a lot of competing demands, and we found that worked really, really well. The CAA student that we had, she worked very, very well with all of those things, and we would find that there were other little pieces of work that were coming up just from other areas of the business, and we'd say, actually, we think this is a job that you could pick up, and they did that very well. They were very flexible. They actually taught a few other members of the team who aren't actuaries quite a few things about Excel and VBA programming, and it was a really good experience.
Well, thank you all, and can I just thank my co-presenters for the last 37 minutes. And now the floor is yours as contributors to the webinar Q&A session. We have a couple actually published already, and we'll turn to those in just a minute. But I will say keep them coming, please. And of course, we've also been emailed and other questions from individuals that aren't on the webinar today, so we can pick some of those up if the initial number of questions dry up. And I think there's some interesting stuff that's been emailed in. The first one that's come in is and thank you for this, it's within the Indian context, and is the CAA planning to create a venture with the Indian Actuarial Institute? I think James gets off the hook on this question. I don't know whether Stacey, Richard, or they're going to stay silent and I will answer. Who's going to go with that one? Before I point Richard.
I'd be happy. I think that to begin with, Clifford mentioned earlier on the role of an accredited association, and that while the joint venture was created by IFOA and SOA, we thought from the beginning and have already successfully had a participation and a joining of ASSA in South Africa. That is a model that we certainly expect and intend to continue to develop, where an association such as the one in India or other parts of the globe could see the opportunity for their actuarial community and for individuals within their the scope of their profession there, the opportunity to join as an accredited association and to create an environment where they provide the community for this group of learners and qualification holders and professionalize that group within the context of their actuarial world, their actuarial organizations, I think is an opportunity that we will continue to pursue and hope to see develop and flourish in the future.
Stacey, anything you want to add?
I would just add that I think, we promote CAA at the International Actuarial Association meetings with many, many different countries. And I know there's been some receptions and things there. And I know we have some specific contacts in India that we're working with as well. So we do hope to have the Indian Institute signing on as an accredited organization. And it may be, if you're thinking of pursuing the credential, pursue it and get the credential now and align with either IFOA or SOA with your membership. And then, if as the other organization comes online, you can move it over at that point in time, because that's separate from the credential. That's all I'd add. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Stacey. And I just wanted to add myself that I've had the great pleasure, I'm assuming this question has come from India, I have a great pleasure of visiting on a regular basis pre-COVID India, know a little bit about and have a feel for the Indian market. The CAA is yet to fully break through, but I think the discussions we've been having with many employers is they see the CAA fit within their HR mix, the sorts of things that James has been speaking about. We understand that there's at least one major employer, actuarial services employer in India, that's produced a framework of support, study, remuneration and reward in relation to passing the CAA. So we're optimistic that with a little bit more traction in the market, this will be a signal to both those that would wish to study the CAA to get on board and study, and also be a signal to, we're optimistic about this credential, that a little bit of Me Too in India amongst the employers will help to kickstart this within the Indian market. And I think then there's a natural fit to answer the question directly about the IAI potentially coming to a decision about wanting to become an accredited partner of CAA Global. So thank you for that question. There's one for James that's popped in. It's a really good challenge and good question about managing an office with trainee actuarial students working along CAAs, and the proverbial question, a little like associates and fellows, is one not quite the one that's made it to the other, and the same sort of dynamic, I guess, is behind the question here about CAAs. What's your feeling about an answer on that, James?
Yeah, thanks, Clifford. It's a really good question, and we find that, well, there's sort of two elements to this. So there's the sort of office training and the kind of skills you need to be successful in the office environment, and for those we have no differentiation at all within that. It is one pool of staff learning those skills, and then whenever it comes to the professional qualifications, because that's the main focus of those is on independent study, and a big part of our study package is set up with the days that they can take off to independently study. So that there are study schemes in place for both those doing the IFOA qualification route and those taking the CAA route, and so it's very clear to them what their options are there, and the fact that these are different qualifications. So it's not so much that one can't do the other, it's rather that it's a different route in, it's brought you to a different place, and so you're working towards something different. In terms of the second part, in ensuring that CAs are not seen as individuals who cannot pass the actuarial examinations, we're very lucky in that we already have a couple of qualified CAAs who have managed to really make this seem as not like a problem at all, as they have both moved on to the FIA qualification, and in April both passed their first set of exams in those. So for our CAs coming through who are interested in potentially going down that route, they can see that, oh, it is possible to complete my exams, move on, and not suddenly get hit by a qualification that's a massive step change up again. So that's been really helpful from us in kind of breaking down that barrier. And so then the focus really does become up from the point of they are separate but complementary qualifications, and it's not one qualification sits under the other.
Thank you very much, James. And just a broadening conversation, I guess, for those on the webinar, they probably spotted by the diversity of accents that amongst the directors of CA, there's both those which are US based and those which are UK based. And so, there are some questions coming in which are a little UK professional body centric. So we will try and keep answer those questions as James has done already over one about progression. But I will ask the colleagues to keep it broad as well, just so that there may be one or two people that are maybe following an SOA track and are interested in the CAA, or how they might do the reverse process that James, a very optimistic and positive process that James just outlined. I think probably we've got some of the James has dealt with some of the immediate ones that have come in about the direction of travel. I think there's one that has come into us quite a number of times, and this is we have established the CAA, as James has outlined, to recruit specifically for this, but we recognise there are people amongst all the associations which are partners in the CAA that sometimes they just wish to not progress, even to an associate member of any of the associations, and to see the CAA as an alternative route, not because of a failure. It's, as James said, there's a different route to reach the credential and deploy their skills within their company. And a question that has come through has been people have known that CAA Global has opened up a window. It opened up a window on the launch of the joint venture where some could cash in, if you like, passes that they'd received with actuarial associations towards the CAA credential. And this window was considered around the time that ASSA have joined, and people have emailed us to ask, have we missed the opportunity? And of course, I just wanted to say to you while we're discussing this here together, no, you haven't missed the opportunity. If you didn't do it when a window was open and then it closed, you haven't missed the opportunity. And now, with ASSA joining, the board has decided that this exemption process against passes of the CAA credential are open, completely open, not with the windows that hitherto were the case. So we're hoping this gives an opportunity for those that see a career path more down the CAA route of carrying out a bit of a re-evaluation in their career, as well as James has highlighted, for those that are recruited in specifically through the CAA route. And I just wanted to say how much I'm meeting actuarial employers to revisit this thing about the mix that are very much recruiting in with CAAs, graduate and from school and from career changers, because they see this as an important mix of the HR capability that they need within their actuarial and para-actuarial teams. I'm desperately trying to fill before you send me another question, because I can see them when they arrive. We've not got. I think we have one that's floating around. Let's take a little look at what that one. Something around CAs tending to work in different domains. So can you tell us more about the role in data science and actuarial teams? James, would you be able to pick that one up?
Yes. So we find a lot of our clients coming to us who want people who kind of have that crossover skill set between having a core understanding of the actuarial concepts, but also having more data science savvy, being able to more delve into data in depth, so that people can basically interrogate their actuarial data and pass on the useful bits and pieces to the actuarial teams for them to then, not have to be confronted with this wall that they can't make anything of. So that's one area where a lot of people have been saying that this qualification really is useful to them, is having people who focus on data science, but they have that background with the actuarial knowledge to be able to pick out what's useful for the insurance, pensions, whatever teams it is. That's one area. The other one I think that we find that Amrit mentioned briefly is that he mainly hires engineers, so that's technical IT coding engineers, and we're seeing more and more people who actuarial software around our domain is getting more and more complex. And so having coders who focus mainly on the coding aspects of it, but have that understanding again of the core concepts from actuarial is really, really useful. And so we found those are two real areas that kind of, they complement your core actuarial teams. And they're areas that actually people with traditional actuarial qualifications maybe aren't as well equipped to deal with. And those are, the perfect areas for the CA qualification to come in and sit there alongside and complement the whole picture. So those are just two that we've really seen a big impact in.
I don't know whether Stacey or Richard have anything to add around that one. I think go for it, Richard.
Actually, Stuart or Clifford, I wasn't going to necessarily try to elaborate on James's point regarding the data sciences aspect of this, but I wanted to kind of back up for just a moment to the previous question that talked about how does this credential sort of fit in an environment in which there are the quote fully qualified fellows or associates, and in some ways I think James addressed it somewhat as sort of the myth that this is viewed as a lesser qualification or there's a stigma attached to it. While this concept of certification of an actuarial analyst is quite new in the actuarial world, I'll have to point out that it is not an uncommon structure and concept in other professions. Medical profession has had physician's assistants and nurse practitioners that fit within their professional scheme. And my background is in law, and the concept of a paralegal has been well established and well recognized for decades in that profession. And I want to go back also to a point that was made by one of the speakers on the video who talked about the opportunity that this kind of a credential and certification creates for people of disadvantaged backgrounds, et cetera, for whom the concept of a university degree plus years of expensive professional education to get a law degree or a medical degree may not be realistic. And as a point of entry to practice and work in a profession, and to learn about the capabilities that they have, and perhaps then, multiply and take it beyond that level, is a great advantage and a great opportunity for employers to really, diversify their workforce and gain benefit of people who have that type of a background and bring them into their workforce and really develop them. And I can't emphasize enough how valuable that is, both from the perspective of those learners as well as, for the employers who can take advantage of that.
And I'll
Thank
just
you
add
for that, Richard. I can see Stacey wanting to come in. Please do.
Just some comments on some of the communications we've had with employers and some of the interviews we've had. We do hear sort of a gap between the data science, kind of the language and how data science use data and that skill set and the actuarial skill set. So we do hear that they are looking for those bridge skills that have both the language and the knowledge on both sides that can, kind of bring the two groups together, help them work together, understand how the other side is looking at data and looking at, the terminology that each group uses to help bridge that. So we do hear a need for that, and we continue to sort of try to build communication back and forth so that even the ASAs and FSAs in the U.S. have some of the data science as well. So we do hear that bridge is needed between the two groups and is very helpful to the employers. Thank you, Clifford.
No, thank you, Stacey. And we're on a roll with a few more questions appearing. An interesting one, and I guess quite a timely one. In the few slides that I said some words around, we mentioned the examination centre-based approach, and there's a question really about how does that work in a COVID environment? When there's a potential that, at a fairly short notice, an examination centre could go into lockdown. I think, I don't know whether, Stacey, would you like to say something about the arrangements that we've put in place to try and deal with this?
I sort of
or would
said
you like?
I think you're better suited to answer.
Just don't want to monopolise. Well, the board has been very, focused on this, given that sadly our first session of the year, unfortunately, we had to postpone, or actually not postpone. That implies late. Cancel, because the whole COVID was just wild at that time across our global footprint. We have been able to put some infrastructure in place, which means that we have the option to go online. Our preferred mode of operation is to continue with examination centres. That's our principal planning assumption and in dealing with all candidates. But we do, please be reassured, if you're a CAA on the webinar here, there is a plan B. And as we approach the examination session here in October, there is a plan B that if you find yourself in lockdown, there is a solution to enable you to continue, because we actually want you to not be interrupted in your direction and tempo of study to complete the credential. So I hope that's an answer to that question. We're running close to our hour with one another, but there's a kind of good one that's a broad couple of questions, which are about professionalism, CPD, and having to do it whilst a CAA global student plays when qualified and joining the association. Richard, would you like to say something about that?
And just say that again, one of the important aspects of professionalizing here and the CAA is by affiliating with an actuarial organization, accredited actuarial organization, IFOA, SOA, ASSA, and again, hopefully in the future others. The qualification holders will have both a responsibility to engage in continuing professional development and learning as an important aspect of their ongoing career development, but it's an opportunity, and it is something that allows both an employer and the individual to continue to enhance their career through this continuing professional development and learning as part of the expectations for anyone that holds this qualification.
Thank you, Richard. So rest assured, when with the CAA Global, it's a credentializing organisation. We want you to be demonstrate at least 1 year's employment, relevant employment during the process, but not have the overhead of a conventional CPD compliance. But that all comes in the professional environment when you subsequently qualify and join the professional body. Well, I have the advantage of looking at a clock here, and I feel a little bit like the newsreader that has to wind up before the weather has to come in. And we're doing a really fine job, the presenters and also our webinar guests, in terms of the questions. You've timed it perfectly, and we're within the last minute now, absolutely now, of our 1 hour together. So on that mark, I'd just like to thank Stacey, Richard and James for the hour that you've been with us, and for both the presentation and answering all the relevant questions that have come through. And I'd like to thank you, our guests on the webinar I was going to say this afternoon, the second webinar of the day, because I'm aware of the time zones. Just to thank you for joining us. I hope you found it interesting. We're very familiar with the background of CAA, obviously some of us on the webinar. I think it's been absolutely fascinating from my viewpoint, hearing James from an employer point of view as well. And I hope whether you're an employer or whether you are a learner, I hope you've had a valuable afternoon. And on that, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at another CEA event in the future. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks. Bye now.